This is the Finesse Media Podcast, Season 3.
Black woman, beautiful, powerful, resilient female of African descent with skin kissed by the sun. Conversation, a talk, especially an informal one between two or more people in which news and ideas are exchanged. We love being Black women. Black women are ambitious. Black women are confident. Black women are diligent. We are tenacious. We walk out of our houses put together. We are many shades and personalities of fabulous. But we as Black women don't talk about our dilemmas, current events, and what's going on every day that affects us. So we created this podcast as a way to laugh together, cry together, and have an open conversation about life as Black women.
Oh, that's deep. Black Women Conversations.
So let's get this thing started. Welcome back. Another episode of Finesse Media Podcast, Season 3. I'm your host, Ken Finesse Media. And as I mentioned right before the break, I got more finesses on this time. Somebody and some ladies that's from the same circle that I am a part of, which is podcasting space. So having this opportunity to chat with other podcasters is a great moment. But also, this is March and we're celebrating women still. So we're going to keep this thing rolling. Shout out to the Xavier Queens that joined us last week. But this episode is, and she's already shouting it out because she's coming back again. Welcome to the Finesse Media Podcast for the first time. The host of the podcast, Oh, That's Deep. Welcome to the podcast, host Nicole and co-host Janine. What's going on, ladies?
Hey, Ken.
Man, listen.
Hey.
Listen, Nicole, I told you we cousins, and so you back again.
Back again. I'm back for more.
And Janine Queen, how you doing? Happy Women's Month.
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, man. So happy to talk with y'all and to really let people know about your podcast, because meeting y'all a couple of what feels like a year ago, but it was a few months ago on Clubhouse, which we'll get into. But I want to jump right into it so people can know about your platform, your podcast. Oh, that's deep. Tell our listeners about the podcast. Oh, that's deep. What is that about?
Hi, I'm Janine.
And I'm Nicole. And this is Oh, That's Deep, Black Women Conversations.
No, this is not the real thing yet. It's coming, I promise. It's a process. We just wanted to take a moment to tell you about the podcast and how it came to be.
We are two college friends that have been on our grind, building our legacies for the past 2 decades, and because of that, we lost touch.
But one day we reconnected. Nicole, how did we reconnect?
Remember the Katie virtual brunch? Remember me, Sonia, you, Melissa, Cherie, Ro? We all did a virtual brunch, the Katie crew.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's when we realized that we not only had a lot to talk about, but we had so much in common. And honestly, Nicole, I was really surprised.
Why?
I mean, Nicole, I am in media and marketing, and I literally got into this field because no one dies if I screw up. Nicole, you literally save lives for a living.
Well, anyway, we realized that no matter how different our lives may be, there are so many things that we have in common.
Nicole, you want to go first?
Janine and I met at Xavier University of Louisiana. Shout out to XU once again. We met freshman year of college. We were in the Katie dorm, which is St. Catherine Drexel dorm. And if you're familiar with Xavier, there's St. Joe and there's Katie. And so I don't know if you were in Katie or St. Joe, Johnny. I don't remember.
I was in Katie.
Okay, so I was in Katie too, and I roomed. My roommate was a mutual friend of ours, and that's how I met Janine. And it's also how I reconnected with Janine through our mutual friend. And because the pandemic was there, and we were going through all of these things, and we were stuck in the house, we basically all linked up and had a brunch initially, just to basically catch up, see what we've been doing over the past 20 years, and vented. And out of that, we were like, man, we talk like every day. We should start a podcast. And so we started a podcast, Oh, That's Deep, Black Women Conversations, to talk about everything that plagues us, right? What we see on the media, what we're dealing with the pandemic, our husbands and how stubborn they are. And so anything you can think about that we go through on a day-to-day basis is what we talk about on the podcast.
Sweet. And how did you guys come up with this name, Oh, That's Deep? Because you guys do, dive deep into, topics, particularly about women topics and everything about, social, content, but how did you guys come up with the topic or with the title?
So Nicole and I brainstormed for a while, and we brainstormed with our mutual friend that we have been discussing, and we kept, throwing things around. And then literally one morning, my husband woke up and was like, how about you call it, Oh, That's Deep? Because we kept throwing around the concept of Black women talk, Black women conversation. So we had that part, but we just didn't have the Oh, That's Deep part. So he was like, how about Oh, That's Deep? So I picked up the phone. I think it was like 8:00 in the morning, which is 7:00 Nicole's time. And I'm like, Nicole, what do you think about this? And she was like, I like it. And I was like, there's the name. And we were done.
Yeah. And that's pretty cool, having a friend to be your co-host. I kind of miss my co-host from previous seasons, because doing it's a lot of fun because you get to bounce off ideas. And if there's a guest on, you two kind of can rally around the guest and ask different questions from different points of views, because my co-hosts have always been women. So shout out to the women's continuing to say that. But what do you guys think about being co-hosts? What are some disadvantages, or I would say advantages, first off, of having a co-host?
I would say the advantage is you always have somebody to bounce ideas off of, right? So you don't have to have a guest on every week because you always have somebody to have a conversation with. You can you bounce ideas off your co-host, so you come together to think of different topics to discuss. You're both looking out for what's going on in the media or on your timeline. So it's basically just more of a collaboration and more like somebody else to help man everything. Mm-hmm. If you're by yourself, you have to do all your social media by yourself, all your interviews by yourself, come up with all your content by yourself. So it is a difference. And seeing that I host a podcast by myself versus the one I host with Janine, it is a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. And Janine, what do you think that are or has been the advantage of having, Dr. Plenty by your side, giving you not only medical advice, but also giving you some support in, whatever the topic is that you guys are discussing?
Right. Aside from her saving my life, literally, she saved my life since we started the podcast. No exaggeration. She literally saved my life. I was in the hospital and she saved my life. So I will put that out there. That's probably the biggest benefit.
Wow.
But aside from that, Nicole spoke on it, our social media, literally is a job in and of itself. And it works out really well because Nicole loves Pinterest and loves Facebook. And I am okay with the two, but that's not my favorite. I'm more of an Instagram and Twitter kind of girl. So we literally are able to split up our social media, and Nicole does the Facebook for the most part and Pinterest for the most part. And then I do Twitter and our IG for the most part. So that, and in addition to it, it's often, you think that when you do a podcast that you'll have a limitless amount of ideas, right? Like the ideas will just keep flowing and flowing. But when you think about it, every week you're like, wait, what did I just talk about? Wait, how many times have we talked about COVID? Wait, is there something new? Is this even interesting? All of those ideas that go through your head that you can't really determine, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? You have someone literally there to say, Janine, that's a terrible idea. Yeah. Or, oh yeah, I like that. So usually when we touch and agree on something, it comes out and it works out really well. And then if one of us is kind of like a little skeptical, we kind of veer away from it and then maybe come back to it and figure that out. So it helps. It really helps with the creative process to have a co-host.
That's what's up. And I know that, the advantages certainly continue to make your podcast grow. But what are some disadvantages that you guys have? But I want to kind of put a twist there to not make it seem negative, because what are the disadvantages of having a co-host, but what have been the growing pains through those disadvantages that you were able to overcome?
I guess when we say disadvantages, you have two people, right? So you have two people, so you have to touch and agree. Like you can't just say, oh, the podcast is going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, no, you only got one half of the podcast. So you have to go and talk to the other half of the podcast to make sure that you touch and agree on that. So it is being very conscious of, it's not just one person, right? You have to represent both people when you're doing something. And even if it's an interest of one person, if the other person is not interested in that, then it's a no-go. So that is one of the growing things that we have to learn. And then the other thing is schedule, right? So if there's an opportunity that comes to be like on your podcast, we have to get on everybody's schedule. So of course, the more people you have involved, the harder it it is sometimes to collaborate schedules. So if there were 6 of us on this podcast, we may not be here tonight. It had been a scheduled
2-part series.
Yeah. So that's right. Pretty much the thing I think.
No, I totally understand that. And so what I want to know is, because people who are watching and listening to us and will certainly listen to That's Deep podcast, we'll give all that information out later in the episode on how you can listen to these ladies. But what are your thoughts about people who are looking to start a podcast? Earlier part of this month, March the 1st, I started a workshop where I help people to start and grow their podcast, with no money and no equipment, because it can be done. But what is your take, Janine? I'm going to ask you this question. What's your take on those people that's kind of hesitant to start a podcast because they think they need the money, they think they need a certain, amount of equipment? So what's your thought and advice to those people that want to start a podcast?
Okay, so the first thing that I would say is make sure that starting a podcast is really what you want to do, because this is a long game, right? Like you're not going to start a podcast and it's going to be a hit overnight. There are, special cases of, that happening, but I doubt it. And a podcast is a lot of work. It's not just, opening the mic and starting to talk. There's planning, there's pre-show, there's after the show, there's social media. There's a lot that you have to do. There's marketing for the podcast. There's a lot that you have to do. So you don't really need the money. I would not say that money or equipment should be something that stops you, because you can, if you have a phone, you can record a podcast, right? And you can have it sound decent. What you need is the passion. Like, you need to be passionate about it, and you need to remember your why, because, you can buy all of the fancy equipment and, be off to a start, but podcast burnout is real. And, you're midway into your first season and you're like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work, especially if you're doing everything yourself. And then oftentimes people are like, this might not be what I want to do. And the passion that they had for the topic that they were discussing kind of fizzles out. So I would just say, have the passion and understand that it's a long game. The equipment and, and all of the software and technology. It literally, if you have Zoom and a phone, you can record a podcast. You don't need all of the fancy equipment, but you really, really do need the passion.
Absolutely. And consistency. I think that is definitely the denominator for kind of life, right? So whatever you're doing, if you're consistent, it will rise at the top. And I find that a lot of podcasting or podcasters just aren't consistent. If you're going to put out an episode every Wednesday, make sure you put that episode out every Wednesday, because people are going to, be anticipating it. And the moment that you don't give or deliver it, they're gone. Like the butterfly comes past their face, they're chasing it. So it's like you have to make sure that you make contact consistently with your audience and continue to put out content, even if it's not an episode. And so if it's replaying stuff, I think a lot of times people kind of start promoting and then they never go back and recycle some of that old content, because as we know with the social media, platforms, the algorithm works against you. So they probably never saw it. So it's probably the first time somebody have saw something. So Dr. Plenty, Nicole, anything on the, advice of giving people that want to start a podcast? Any advice?
I would definitely go with consistency. If you are working a full-time job, you have to set aside time to do this every single week. For me, I have a lot of hats that I wear. So if we're going to record at a certain time, I'm not deviating from that specific time. It has to be very, very much planned, consistent, because what you don't want to do is start doing a podcast and then you're doing all this stuff for your podcast and then you get fired from your job. Make sure you are tight on everything and make sure that you're structured and make sure that you're not letting other things in your life slide for the podcast or vice versa. So it's all about balance and making sure you're structured.
Mm-hmm. No, that's absolutely correct. Having the key work-life balance needs to apply still in the podcasting realm. Time management still has to apply, in your professional realm, because most of us, podcasting, you don't get a dime on it. And we can talk about monetizing and those types of things. But for people that's just getting started, make sure that you get the time management thing together. You're absolutely correct. I only record at a certain time. I don't care what day it is, but I only record at a certain time. And so when you guys are doing your podcast, podcast. There's a lot of fun. You're having different guests on. I know for me, I have a ton of people that I can tell you who I had a good time with. But I'll ask you, Nicole, who has been that favorite guest? Because you guys, powered out together. But those moments when you do have a guest on, who has been that guest for you that you most remember?
Well, I feel like we have a lot of memorable guests. I think that the one that I was like, probably be I'm a Pound Cake, because she's just like very much so like her spirit just sort of takes over anything that she's on, and she has a huge personality, and she says stuff with such confidence, and she's very convicted. So she definitely is one of my most memorable people on the podcast.
Cool. Janine, who has been your guest? Favorite guest?
Wow. Well, I don't want to say favorite because I think they've all been great in their own ways, but I would say that same episode, my most memorable guest is Brandy, and I think it's because not even since the podcast, she's always been flourishing, but since the podcast, she's made a huge move over to Essence. So she's at Essence Magazine now. So it's kind of like, oh my God, we had her on the podcast before she was like huge. I mean, she literally met Oprah, right? So
Sweet.
Like, I think that I'm just excited for her career and where she's going more than anything. But like, I think she's the one that I follow the most. I'm just, super proud of her. So, but I don't think I have a favorite. Like, I don't think that I have a favorite guest. I think they've all been super, super amazing.
No, that's super cool. I'll tell you my favorite moment then, since you guys, or Janine, you didn't have a favorite. I'll tell you my favorite moment is meeting you two on Clubhouse. My goodness, today. Let me tell y'all. And not y'all that's here, in the virtual space with me, but y'all who's watching and listening. I met these queens on the space of Clubhouse, and I'll tell you, Clubhouse has literally changed my life and helped me in my podcasting space in terms of learning and unlearning certain things. And so how are you guys, and I'll ask you, Nicole, first, how are you kind of adding Clubhouse in with your podcasting? Because some say Clubhouse may be taking over the podcasting space. So even if you care to kind of add to that or speak on that, but how has Clubhouse benefited you and as being a podcaster?
It's funny because like Janine will tell you, like, I am not really big on social media. I actually do not like social media. I post a lot on social media. I like to scroll through it, but I am not like one that's like, oh my God, I got to get on social media to find out about my life. So with one more thing, because Janine was like, oh, there's this thing called Clubhouse. I'm like, oh, one more thing. But I will say from Clubhouse, I don't get on it a lot. When I get on it, I learn a lot about like stocks and bonds and like cryptocurrency and stuff like that. And I think those type of talks are awesome. But I have been invited to a lot of like medical talks about infertility and fibroids and things like that. So I think I've done like 4 or 5 of those talks now. And I've always gotten to meet other people. And so I think that's been more beneficial probably for me with Pregnancy Pearls podcast, as opposed to, oh, that's deep, because I'm always asked to do like something medical, if that makes sense. But it's great. I mean, it's a great networking tool. You get to talk to people and meet them, which is a little different than you would on Instagram. I mean, you get pictures, you know that you have a friend in Instagram when they reshare your stuff and you reshare theirs.
That's right? The validation. Like, that's the validation card. Yeah.
My friend, right? But on Clubhouse, you actually get to talk to them and interact with them. And you now know, like, I actually click with this person. Mm-hmm. So I do think that Clubhouse is cool. I like the fact that it's audio only and I don't have to do my hair. I don't have to do my makeup. I can just come as my authentic self to Clubhouse, give my little 2 cents, and then I can quietly peace out and leave.
I love the leave quietly thing.
I love leave quietly.
Johnny, how has Clubhouse benefited you as a podcaster?
Wow. I think that it helps you meet people that have your same interest, right? Like, yep. With every other social media, it's kind of like they're your friends and then they grow from your friends or something that you see on their page that you like, but it doesn't necessarily have that personal connection like Nicole was mentioning. Whereas with Clubhouse, the topic of conversation is the title of the room, right? So when you walk into the room or go into the room that the person is going to be interested in at least the topic of conversation, right? And then it's always really fascinating where the conversation goes from the initial topic. But I think that it allows us to meet people, and it allows us to meet people like you, other creatives who are on this same journey that we're on, that can say, oh, well, maybe you should do this or try this. Like, one of the recommendations that we got on Clubhouse was to try Squadcast, which we tried it a couple of times and it was okay. And then all of a sudden it crashed on us one day and we were like, we're not doing this anymore. We're going back to the tried and true, right? But it gives you ideas of things that you can try, things that you might not have known. Like, it helps me a lot with the social media algorithm. Like, there are certain things that I know that if I post, I'll get a bunch of likes because I can kind of navigate the algorithm now. Whereas before, I was on what we can now consider the old social media algorithm for Instagram. So it's things like that that keep you abreast of what's going on, that helps.
Yeah.
But also, Clubhouse is one of those places. It's, I kind of say that it's like a focus group for free, right? Like, you get to see what people are interested in and what they're talking about. And it's absolutely free. So those are the kinds of things that, Clubhouse, I think, are really good for.
Yeah. The gems is free, right? They drop in gems. Oh my God, I'm so sick of that. I have never, it feels like I have never said the word respectfully this many times in my life. Tap in, all this lingo.
Right?
I'm like, who am I turning into? So, oh my God, Clubhouse. So you guys are on Clubhouse. It's helping you grow your podcast. You're having great and amazing guests on Oh, That's Deep. But what's next for Oh, That's Deep? What is the goal for the platform? The podcast.
Nicole?
You're on many different platforms. What is the goal for the podcast?
Well, I think for Oh, That's Deep, our goal is to reach as many people as we possibly can. We want people to feel comfortable in our space. We want people to join the conversation. We will eventually host conferences. We will travel. We will bring the podcast on the road. So we want to reach our people. We want more friends of the podcast. We want all of you watching to follow the podcast. Go and subscribe and listen to the podcast.
No, go do that right now.
Go do it right now.
After this episode, then you go do it. Janine.
Matter of fact, pause this episode, go and subscribe, rate us, all of that, and then come back and you'll get more of us.
There you go. There you go. No, so I love it. So again, just wrapping this thing up, and it's Women's Month. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you guys something about, being a woman. And I have no idea what that is, but I will tell you, man, each and every week on the episode of Finesse Media Podcast, I ask my finesses, and that's you, who's finessing the game. But because it's Women's International Month, I'm going to kind of change it up. So as we're celebrating all things women, can you tell me who's that woman for you, Nicole, that's personally or professionally finessing the game? What woman for you?
What? We don't like to brag on ourselves, but you know what? It's Women's History Month.
There
and
you
I'm
go.
going to say, we finessing the game, Ken. We are finessing the game. We are, Oh, That's Deep is amazing. And if you're not on Oh, That's Deep, you need to get on Oh, That's Deep, and you need to subscribe. So I would say we're finessing the game in our marriages, in our careers, in the podcast world. Yeah, I can toot our horn. I did it.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. I definitely agree. Janine, what woman for you personally or professionally that's finessing the game?
Wow, there's a lot of women finessing the game. Nicole already said us. But you know what? It's Women's History Month. And this is something that I'm super proud of because she's a Black woman and she's making change in the world. Ethiopia yesterday was named the CEO of Motown Records, and she is finessing the game like no other, right? She's the chairwoman and CEO of Motown Records. So I'll say her. She is really finessing the game.
Dope. Well, that's what's up, man. And I'll definitely go back and say this, what Nicole said. Y'all are definitely finessing the game. I thank you so much for joining the Finesse Media Podcast Season 3 and joining me on this episode to talk about all things podcast. And people need to keep up, subscribe, like, share the whole bit, and let these people know how they can do it. Nicole or Janine.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Y'all both finessing the game to me.
Okay,
I don't care who give it out. Just give it out to the people.
The easiest way is to go to www, which everybody knows that part, but that's deep, BWC for Black Women Conversations.com. So it's that's deep, BWC.com. And you can listen to us there. You can write us there. You can follow us on social media there. You can rate us there. You can subscribe. Everything you need to do, it's right there.
Oh, that's deep. All right.
BWC.com.
You've been listening to another episode of Finesse Media Podcast. Ladies, thank you so much for joining this podcast. And I'm your host, Ken Finesse Media, and I'll see you next week with something brand new. Peace.
Hey, friends, I know that you guys are listening to Oh, That's Deep, Black Women Conversations. And if you're not, you should be. But also tune into Pregnancy Pearls with me, Dr. Plenty. You can find me on any platform you listen to podcasts.
Sweet.
This has been another edition of the Finesse Media Podcast. Join us again next week for the latest news from HBCUs. Special guest